Hello, everybody. Welcome to our AI for Financial Services series. I'm excited to be talking with our esteemed guests here, Rick and Kellen. Quick reminder for everybody tuning in, this webinar is being recorded. Whatever we say can and will be used against us in a court of law. And please submit all questions to the Q&A feature so that way we can answer it at the end. But I'm excited again to have our fireside chat. Let's start with some introductions. Rick, like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Rick Atkinson. I'm the CTO for Baypoint Advisors. We're an investment management company based in Atlanta. And before, I've spent basically 25 years in the fintech space, primarily software development, building front office systems, portfolio management systems, quant, relative value. And before Baypoint, I co-founded a SaaS product. There's a compliance product called Basis Code that we ran for about 10 years and sold to Orion Advisors a couple of years ago. So yeah, that's kind of sums me up.
That's great. Thank you. Mr. Kellen.
Hey, everyone. So I am Kellen Dam. Within Microsoft, I'm a principal cloud solution architect, and actually I am assisting Rick here with a lot of projects, and I help other customers like Rick with specifically AI in that space. So kind of bringing that expertise. And here, I guess my background has always been around development and data, and super excited to be here and glad that I was included in this kind of as a surprise. So nice to meet everyone and ready to go.
You know, we're full of surprises here at DataStax.
Love it.
I'll round it out. My name is Greg Petrosian. I lead our global partnership with Microsoft at DataStax, and it's been great working with both Rick and Kellen on what they've brought to the market with our forces combined. So, Rick, a little bit about Baypoint. You guys are transforming capital markets, but more specifically private markets, and you're looking to be a leader, innovating, not being a follower. And when you think of the private market, there's a lot of tedious analysis and tribal knowledge, right? Especially when you are working with underserved markets or ones where you have to do tons of research and work with more fringe investments that are non-traditional. And so you set your goal to make Baypoint Advisors relevant in this space. What did that mean to you exactly? When you had your leadership come to you and say, hey, we got to do something with AI. What was that initial emotions that hit you, and then how did you chart a path on becoming AI enabled or AI driven?
Yeah, I mean, I was probably like most people, who's in the tech space when AI kind of comes into play, and you kind of watch from the sidelines and you see this buzzword of AI and all the marketing and technobabble that kind of goes around that. And I thought, I was like, I don't want to be like a licensing manager for ChatGPT seats, because that's what everybody just wants to get into ChatGPT and do stuff. And I was like, this is just a transformative moment, I think, in technology. We were talking earlier about, like when the internet, first hit, there's all these opportunities. And to me, this is kind of on that level of, of possibilities that it opens up to businesses. So
yeah, it's like tectonic shifts, right? Of technologies that we've seen in our history, and the tectonic shift that generative AI specifically has brought, and what ChatGPT has done is just instill the FOMO of, how do we take something ChatGPT-esque, bring it into our company, into our four walls, right? And so, what was that like, having to educate the organization on, hey, I get ChatGPT is the fun thing to use right now, but what do you need to watch out for? Like, let's make sure we're not putting client information, into this, public forum. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, it's actually, when you talk about educating them, it's really more about educating yourself first. We had a moment where we kind of I sit with senior management. We kick around ideas, and our CEO told me one day, he was like, I want you to use AI to go find me some, additional business, additional loans, additional investors. And when he said that, it just seemed crazy to me at first. Like, I can't just go to ChatGPT and say, hey, where are the investors at? But I walked out, and of course I said, yeah, let me look into that and see what I can do. But I walked away from that kind of, doing a little bit of soul searching. It was like, I feel like my reaction came from more of a source of ignorance. I don't really understand all the tools that may be available to me. So rather than having this knee-jerk reaction that, that's just not possible, or that's just not what it does right now, I decided to start digging into it. And you go down that rabbit hole, trying to get into the weeds with it. And I came across the concept of RAG AI. And that's what kind of struck me. I was like, wait a second. My problem with LLMs and Chat GPT and all that is that I can't share my company's business and our deals and loans and investors with this. It's just it stops. It's a showstopper. And as soon as I started digging into that further, and I said, okay, well, let me find, a way to, I'm a very hands-on person. I want to build something out. I want to do a proof of concept. And so I started looking in the RAG AI space, got into vector databases, and started looking at, some possibilities there. I sent out some feelers. I won't mention any names to some companies that, they give you here's a trial, go knock yourself out. I reached out to the DataStax team and said, hey, here's what I'm looking at doing, and got on a call with these guys, and they're asking about what I'm trying to do. Anyway, we fire up like, we get into Langflow and we start building out this proof of concept, and me and my team's working on it. But, we would hit a brick wall, and the DataStax team would come in and get us through that hurdle. And I just really appreciated the fact that we were new in this space, and they knew that, and they were kind of holding our hands and bringing us there.
Yeah, and that's what we love to do, and that's what I love to see my team and our collective team helping customers like yourself figure out, hey, what is retrieval-augmented generation? That is what RAG stands for those in the audience that Rick was mentioning. And how can you bring this private data and have a large language model ground its responses on your private data without it being trained on, right? And so that very early architecture of RAG is what was, I think, the beginnings of the concept of Atlas, your intelligent investor portal. Can you speak a little bit about what was that first use case? Like, how did you come to that first use case, and how did Atlas come to be?
Yeah. First of all, with you going through that proof of concept, it was, like I said, we do private debt, private equity. So we do a lot of loan agreements, and these loan agreements can be hundreds of pages of just dry legalese. And part of our proof of concept is we loaded in one of these loan documents and started asking questions about it. And it was like magic to me when it answers a simple question like, hey, what's the interest rate on this loan? Well, it figured it out from the document. That's great. But then you asked it a very sophisticated question about, what happens if the borrower misses a payment and this and that occurs? What happens? And it would come back with a response. And it wasn't just regurgitating a paragraph from page 48 of the PDF. It intimately understood the document and the nature of the loan and answered it. And that, I was sold at that point. I was like, and it was all this was in Langflow, we ripped the data out of the PDF, put it into the vector database, and then took that and sent it off to Azure OpenAI to interpret and answer the question. And that was the light bulb moment for me with this. But our Atlas project is it's an investor portal as a platform is kind of what we call it. We built something from the ground up for Baypoint to basically be able to manage our business, our investors, a means to come in and see, how much money they have and, how much money they've made. And we fundraise, we onboard, we just run our entire business through it. And I've always wanted to kind of bring AI into it. I see all this stuff happening on the sidelines. And so once I got once I understood the concept of RAG AI, we did a proof of concept where, you could ask questions about loans and all. And that was neat as like a chat bot, to be used internally within the company. But I wanted to apply it to the portal more directly to investors and outside people. And so we had this concept of data rooms. For people who's not familiar with what a data room is in the financial space, it's basically just a fancy word for like a private SharePoint where you can share files for, high net worth individuals or investors who are looking to invest in one of your funds. They want to learn about it. And a lot of times it seems like a paradox to me, because we have these high net worth people who don't have a lot of time. And then we put like 700 documents in a data room and go, here, everything's right there. Go tell us, see if you want to invest in this or not. I'm like, this doesn't seem to make sense. Who actually looks at all this stuff? And so the idea was, well, hey, what if we took this RAG AI approach with our data room that has 500 files about this new offering? And what if we could just kind of like, chat GPT-ize this and make it a chat where this person without a lot of time, with a lot of money, wants to ask a question, they can ask a question, and it will cycle through the all the data that's embedded in there and answer it. And again, I use this term too much, but like a light bulb moment for me was, data is king, right? If you're in software and you're working in this space, data is king. And data for the longest time has been, for me, like SQL databases or just databases in general, structured data. And we would always have attachments for loan documents, et cetera. And, but you couldn't really leverage that information. It was really more for just somebody to take a peek at a PDF while they're perusing something else. But now what if you could actually mine and query that data to, now you're, because you look at what your system is, you've got a database and then you've got all these unstructured documents. Well, now what happens when you can bring those into play into making decisions and doing things? So, so that was the first production kind of use case we implemented where, okay, we're going to use RAG AI for our data rooms to help our investors.
Yeah, so it's kind of a defining moment, I think, for financial services that has been riddled with unstructured data, right? Like now there's a way to get insight out of unstructured data and also apply use cases, right? And what you astutely saw was, hey, our investors need an easy way to be able to understand our offerings, make that personalize it to them and what they're trying to accomplish. And really what AI provides is not just regurgitation, but synthesis, right? It's able to take that synthesis of what I'm asking for, what I'm looking for, the hordes of unstructured data has access to, and take that next level deeper of the type of insights I can get from it. And so I think where you started with Atlas, it was a genius idea that really bridges the gap, I think, in your business, right? You want to bring AI to the place where you're engaging with the customers and it's very natural in your workflow. It's that same place you're going to be where you're looking at your documents, where you expect AI to also be right there with you. So Rick, people love to see versus hear. So I don't know if you have a chance to share your screen, maybe show us a little bit about Atlas and some of the questions it can handle.
Sure. Let me share my screen here. Okay. So we're gonna go through this data room, process so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So this is the initial use case. So I'm just going to sign into our investor portal and I'm going to go to the data room section. So I'm signing in as an investor. I'm in our demo environment and I've got some kind of demo funds, if you will. So typically we would set up a data room around maybe a new fund or some new offering that we're pushing. So I'm going to go to the funds data. And okay, so it comes in, has a nice pretty screen, allows investors to invest, but let's go ahead and go into the data room. And so what happened here is, this is a very small example, but we basically loaded some, we created this mythical fund here and loaded some documents on it. And so again, kind of a SharePoint approach. It's basically a file repository. So the first thing we did is, so when we load these documents in, and by the way, we're using like this whole application is serverless, runs in the Azure cloud. and we're using Azure Storage to store all the documents. So we kind of intercepted the process of when we go put the documents into Azure Storage, we also take the contents of the PDFs and strip the data from it and load those into the vector databases within Astra, which is also running within Azure. And then as soon as we do that, we run it through a process that says, hey, take these 500 documents and generate just a simple paragraph for the user to explain what this document is. So that's one thing that's happened here, is that the documents got loaded. And then we go ask on each document, hey, sum it up in a paragraph what this document is. So that's just one example of how we, hopefully making it easier for the end investors to see. But so what I really wanted to show here is this AI bot on the other side, and we're still kind of working through the look and feel. We're constantly kind of refining it, but the basic premise is I want to ask a question of the data room, and I don't necessarily want to look through every single document to figure this out. So in this scenario, we can seed a question to them and say, if you don't know what to ask, well, here's a question to ask. And so in this, we're saying, hey, what's the minimum investment for the fund? And so the first thing we do from a, compliance, privacy, security is obviously a very big deal in the financial space. We want to, basically tell the end user investor that, hey, I understand that I'm using AI, and that we can't be held liable if it does give a bad answer, which I've yet to see it give a bad answer. But so we have them go through this user agreement, and then it takes the question and it sends it on, and it comes back, and yes, minimum investment for this fund that we set up here, this mythical fund, is $100,000. And the other thing that's nice about it is that, so let me kind of break down what happened here. We took the question, we then ran the question against the Astra, the data API within DataStax, and it came back with a list of embeddings that it thought were more relevant to my question. Mm-hmm. And if we get time here in a minute, I'll show you. We'll walk through some of this code to show it actually what it's doing. But and then it takes those embeddings and opens up a session with Azure OpenAI, sends them all the embeddings, sends them the question. And then this is what's great about this stuff, is that we control the prompt behind the scenes, right? So we can tell it, hey, you're going to be professional, you're going to be very concise, you're going to be very positive. But you're only going to answer the question based off the data I'm providing to you here, in addition with our within our chat, within our prompt. I'm sorry. We give it very explicit instructions on how to respond to it. And I'll tell it, if you can't answer it from the information you get, then just tell them you can't answer it. This is meant, we don't want it hallucinating and, oh, well, I don't know what the return is, but maybe it's 20%, No, it has to answer it from the data given to it. And then it'll come back with the actual documents, the most relevant documents. So in this case, this how to invest in funds data was the most relevant document. And we'll now provide a link that'll take us into Azure Storage, which will pull the actual PDF down for them to actually read the PDF themselves.
So two things you hit on, Rick. The first one, how important that master prompt is, right? And making sure that it has that initial prompt that can provide the experience for the end user, but also citations, right? Hey, here's the answer, but also here's where I found the answer. If you want to double click through. I think especially in financial services, citations are of utmost importance.
Yeah, the data API returns all these citations, if you will, and it gives them a similarity score and says a relevant score, and say, okay, and what I do is we just sort and take the most relevant one. Now we give all the information right now to Azure OpenAI, and it will answer based off that. But yeah, I want it to be where, hey, you know what? If you don't really trust that answer, go look at the document itself if you're unsure, or maybe you just want to learn more about dig deeper into the question. So.
How nice was it that was baked into our data API, that ability for the similarity scoring?
Oh yeah, I mean, just taking a step back. So our backend architecture is .NET Core, and so we talked earlier about we were using Langflow really as a proof of concept to build this out, and I was amazed with that. I was like, oh, this is so great. I'm like, okay, now I need to translate this into Atlas, which is a .NET Core backend. I didn't necessarily want to write a Python service or whatever. I wanted to bring it into our world. And so I started kind of, talking with the team and researching the offerings from DataStax, and I came across the Data API, which is basically a REST-based API into all this. And yeah, it was great to be able to just, talk through that and then just work everything through that. So it really is language agnostic. You're not tied to Python. You're not tied to obviously .NET or anything. You pick your language and go. And that was really great.
And I think that's one of our goals, right? To make it super easy to build, right? We're really focused on the developers that have the ideas and want to get to, from POC to production. And that's why our data API and as well as our .NET SDK hopefully help accelerate to get you there, right? I think we have, a legacy understanding that we are a Cassandra company, right? And so you need all this niche Cassandra knowledge to be able to work with any of our products, but really we've abstracted that away. And so you're just getting the performance and the relevance that we're able to bring all the way up to, enterprise grade. And you're able to work with that just with an API call. So love to hear that.
Yeah. If we get into the code here in a little bit, the .NET SDK you guys are working on it rocks. The code, it greatly simplified my code. I've got some examples where I'll show where I'm not using it, somewhere I am, just to show the difference. And that just shows you guys are making it easier and easier to get in and start using this.
So, and before we move into the code, just a couple more questions for you. You were kind of speaking to the learning curve and how we helped you through that, how we helped you overcome some of the hurdles as you were going down the rabbit hole of Gen AI. But you have tons of experience as well. You've built complex systems before. What was your experience like in more traditional web dev, app dev days, and then having to translate that into building an AI application and bringing all the different patterns like RAG, to bear in a production type experience?
Yeah, I think it's really just another tool. If you want to think about it as a developer, it's another tool in the tool set. You leveraging RAG AI. Just like you're accessing databases to pull information, you're accessing storage. It's another means to do that. And again, there's certainly, you've got to figure out the configuration of stuff. For me, I started digging into vector databases, and it's kind of crazy what the math is on this stuff. And I don't have to understand any of that. That all gets abstracted away from me. I just give it data to chunk and embed into the database, and it figures out all the vector arrays and all that stuff. And the key is to not get too bogged down into the the high math and everything that's happening behind the scenes. I just focus on, hey, what is that I need to do? What are the interfaces on the API that I need to leverage to do what I need to do? And there were times, in proof of concept and even with, building this out, I'd get on the call with a DataStax engineer and go like, I'm not figuring this out. And again, a lot of it came from just, personal ignorance. And same thing with Kellen. I'd reach out. Kellen and I would talk about, I'm using this this model to do this. Well, he's like, well, why are you doing that? Why don't you use this one instead? And I'm like, oh, because I don't know. I just didn't know it was working the way I did it. But that's where it's good to be surrounded by people like Kellen and the engineers from DataStax to kind of guide you through it.
Totally. Yeah. And so really you're piecing together services, right? And you are marrying those services with the right models, right? From like data ingestion to RAG. And so, thank you for showing us the portal. Now, what about the code? I think you're going to show us some code and kind of the back end. Would love if you could talk through how you're using the data API as well as the .NET SDK, and some of these components, and how easy it was to possibly call those services.
Yeah, let me pull up. going to share my screen again. All right, so yeah, we're in code world now. So I'm going to start. So you saw, if you remember the screen where it asks a question, you get an answer back. I'm going to kind of start, and this code isn't super pretty in places, but just bear with me. I'll kind of walk you through it. So here I'm going to start with just asking a room question. So first thing we do is instantiate a client to Azure OpenAI using our endpoint and API keys. Then we get a handle on a chat client, and this is all using the Azure OpenAI SDK. And then this is where again the deployment model is king here. You want to pick the right one. Some will give you better answers than others. Sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes it's working with smarter people than you to help you figure that out. But and then we do a little bit of work here. And then the first thing we need to do is we need to get our embeddings. We've got the question. We need to get our embedding. So I'm going to jump to this code. And so this code is not using the SDK. This is just raw REST sharp. If you're familiar with working in .NET, this is just a REST-based talking to a REST API. So I have to get a client. I got to get a request, and then I'm doing all this lovely dynamic JSON to kind of build my parameters of what they're asking, and taking in their security level, like what's the access level of the person asking, etc. And then it basically takes that JSON, executes it, sends this off to the DataStax API, and it comes back with a list of embeddings that we then deserialize and send back up. So back to so here's we've gotten the embeddings, and now we do some additional stuff that I won't dive into. We go pull some of their prior chat information to add that as context into the prompt as well, so the prompt knows that this person has asked these questions before. And then it's just as simple as going to the Azure OpenAI chat instance we have, passing it the questions, passing it all the embeddings that we got from DataStax, and come back with an answer. And then we just do some cleanup of the answer, add some HTML to it or whatever to make it look nice. And then we log the information into our system so that we know the question, we know the answer. So if we ever get anybody come back going, hey, you got a crazy, I got some crazy answers from your system. I want to see it. We want to be able to walk through that and see. But this, let's dive into the process of actually embedding and chunking the data into Astra. And this is where the SDK kind of kicks in. So in this embed a room document, there's a process that iterates through all the documents being loaded into Azure, and it says, okay, well, let's take each one. Let's also embed or chunk it at that point. So a little bit of code here to basically extract all the text from the PDF. And then we go through this process of, as I said, chunking the data. There's certain, you want to take a certain amount. You don't want to take a 10,000, word document and send it all into one chunk necessarily within Astra. So we breaking it into manageable pieces, and we even add a little bit of overlap to it to say, get, what is it? In this case, we're doing 800, at a time, and but have a little overlap to it to, that's just, it works better for the embedding process. But yeah, so here's where it gets fun. So here, now we're using the SDK instead of doing the REST sharp stuff. Get an instance of my client, get an instance of my database. What key space to me is like a database schema. Which schema is this in? Which collection? To me, a collection is like a table. This is going to go in the room collection, and take that chunk and basically we're taking the chunk and we're putting it into the vectorized field within the data API, and then we call the insert, and it's now embedded into the system. One thing I'll note here is that, to me, from what I've learned so far, is it's important up front to figure out how you want to catalog your collections. Mm-hmm. What metadata do you need available? Because I need to be we'll have thousands and thousands of documents sitting in here, so I don't want to just take a question and give it to Astrid and say, hey, go figure this out off this question. I want to be able to, zero down into, hey, which client is asking? So it's a multi-tenant system we built. Which client's asking? Which room are they in? Maybe which document are they looking at? A specific document where they're asking the question. What's their access level? I don't want you to give me embeddings back for something this person doesn't have access to. So this takes a lot of forethought into figuring out how you want to do that. But then once you do that, you just populate your parameters from your data, put that chunk, insert it in, and you're done.
So Rick, I think you're bringing a really good point. It's what I call like the Russian nesting doll effect of the metadata and the layers that you need to literally instruct the large language model how to use. And this idea of how you are bringing those, nesting pieces together and instructing the large language model with those collections. And that is why you're able to get such accurate results, is my bet.
Yes, absolutely. I was talking about our example earlier where we did a proof of concept and we gave it a document and it gave us great answers. And so we were all like, oh, you high five, celebration. Then you give it a couple of documents and ask it the same question for 2 different loans, and it would start answering, it answered wrong because it was looking at the second loan, not this loan, when I asked it, what's the interest rate or something. So this is where, you've got to be able to, it's just like, a normal SQL database, right? You've got to apply the proper filters in place to make sure you've got to set up the LLM to succeed here, right? You've got to give it, if you're giving it just this, giant swath of data and not giving it any context, you're not going to get the best answer. So that's our job, is to make it simple to the end user. Hey, just ask your question. We figured this out on the back end, and send it through.
Yeah, give it a means and a way to be able to synthesize what you're looking for and where it needs to go look to go get those answers, right?
Yeah, that's certainly critical.
Awesome. Well, Rick, thanks for diving into the code with us. And yeah. Kellen, you've been quiet. I know you've been pinging in the chat, answering people's questions. So thank you for that. But Kellen, what is, in your experience and what you're doing in your career currently, how does Microsoft support developers like Rick? I love what we're doing between Langflow and the Azure OpenAI models. At Build not too long ago, Microsoft is all in on AI. And .NET's evolving. It's riding that same AI wave. So what are some of the services that come top of mind for you and what you've been working on with Rick that help build around AstroDB to bring this experience to life?
Yeah, the best thing I could say is that, and it's been kind of evolving, over the quite a few years, as we've seen, is that the power of choice. And what I would say with that is with Microsoft, it's not like we want you to use all of our products. Obviously, we have a whole plethora of different products that customers can use. But the biggest thing that I can attribute to is like when MCP was brought to the forefront, or A2A, or even with DeepSeek, we were one of the first companies to allow that on the platform. And it wasn't like a wait and see an approach. We wanted to be at the forefront to give our customers choice. And the other thing that we're really allowing to do is through tools like Azure AI Foundry, where you give the ability to streamline your development, customize, and then all the tools are in one place, for things like evaluations, playgrounds, even monitoring, and I think the other thing that customers are really that sets it apart is having the ability to have access to any Azure OpenAI model. We just recently, like you mentioned, through Build, opening up the entire catalog for Hugging Face. I mean, I think there's 20,000 different models that customers can get to. And then, as you saw also, now people can get Grok, or, we're just always trying to give the customers choice, and, like you said, Langflow, them having the ability to interact that, any tool that they want to use in Azure or with any of ours, fully available. And like you said, with the whole not thing, the whole .NET change, you guys changing from, being a Python only type solution to allowing .NET. The same thing goes for us, for the, for the way of AI agents and whatever you call it, is when we deployed our enhanced libraries like semantic kernel, for those that don't know, that's like a C# native SDK for orchestrating LLMs and LES service, but it's more than an SDK. It's a framework designed for, creating agents that can call existing code. And just like Rick said, that just simplifies a lot of deployments for, for customers. The other thing I would say, our Azure SDKs are crucial. They simplify interaction with every part of our AI stack, from provisioning models to querying the vector databases, in your case, Astra, and this makes, integration seamless for, millions of developers already familiar with the .NET platform.
Love it. Yeah, and to the same points, I'll just reiterate, making it easy, exposing all the different models out on the market, but also doing that with trust. I think something that we really value in our partnership with Microsoft is how much trust there is within Azure, right? And why organizations like Baypoint are bringing such, trust-sensitive applications like their investor portal to Azure, working with both of our teams to make that happen. Can you explain a little bit on how Azure ensures that these large language models don't train on their customer data? What does isolation look like at the infrastructure level? Because I think that's one misconception I hear all the time out there is, first we had misconceptions around the cloud, right? Hey, if I'm building that with the cloud, all of a sudden Microsoft can see all my data, and then now we're hopping to, oh, well, not only am I in the cloud, but now I'm exposing it to models. How do you speak to that?
So I would say this is probably one of the number one questions we first get when, we first engage with customers. I think even Rick asked the same question when I first, met with him is, hey, I have this model. Are you training on it? And I think, that's the one thing that we've even shifted from, when these questions are on data privacy and training, especially for financial services. And our commitment is absolute and can be, broken down into a clear promise, that, when customers use service like, Azure OpenAI or Foundry or whatever, the foundational models do not train on your prompts, completions, or any part of your customer data. It's a contractual commitment and your data remains your own. I mean, I can't stress that enough. That's really important and baked into it, and I mean, the other thing to understand too is that we have logical isolation through our tools. You can have a sandbox resource. With that, you can ensure that you have strict data handling, whether it's through Astra or any third-party tools, and then, I mean, the other important thing is like zero data telemetry. So, that only the data sent back to, is model that's sent back to the model is token count and deployment information. Those are really important to understand. The other thing that I would say is also what's important is understanding the infrastructure isolation and security posture. For a firm like Baypoint, understanding how the infrastructure level is imperative for them to know. So like we provide multiple layers of isolation and control, like through network isolation, RBAC, policies, all of those type of things are really crucial to, growing your entire AI platform. It's just not using a model and using the tools. You have to layer those pieces to have true success. And I mean, another big thing that, to the point is compliance and trust for financial services. Azure's compliance and security posture, it's not generic. It's engineered to meet the stringent demands of firms like Baypoint. We have, comprehensive certifications. We adhere to a vast of global and industry-specific certifications like FedRAMP, SOC 2, ISO 271s. And then, we're also dedicated to, a financial service compliance program. We provide specific guidance, commitments, and resources to help firms, meet those through policies and, compliance tools that we already have built in. And then finally, I'll end with this. The other thing that we have tools, advanced threat protection in government. We provide defense in depth with tools like Microsoft Defender for Cloud for threat detection, Microsoft Purview for data governance and auditing, and then also, full support for custom managed keys through Key Vault, and then allowing you to use your own encryption keys for an added layer of control over your data at rest. And those are all important things that really have to be taken in consideration, not just if the whole data and where it's being utilized and things like that. So
and that's what I love about our partnership is Microsoft is so focused on the infrastructure level of AI, right? And so we can be focused at the database level and all the way up to the application level. And so I would think when you bring our two forces combined around that, companies like Baypoint, people like Rick can go and go from crazy idea to, hey, we've got some working code here and an application that we even trust customers to use, right? And Rick, I'd love to go to you at this point. I think when you look at financial services as a whole, there was a lot of players that weren't as, ready to jump in front of AI as you guys were, right? And I think with some of the points that Callan was mentioning around the security and compliance, that helps gets leaders to a point of feeling comfortable to be able to start approaching those types of use cases. What was that experience like for you or your leadership? How did they overcome these trust issues? I mean, I think you were fortunate. We're like, hey, we just need to chat GPT, I think. Let's just go for it, right? But was there ever a pullback moment of like, oh, wait, let's think through that? Again, I'm sure education was very core to this. And we'd love to kind of hear how you overcame probably those trust issues at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the Jurassic Park syndrome here, right? The dinosaurs can't escape from the park here. Our data, when we load it can't get used by training models. It can't get outside. And yeah, just to reiterate what both of y'all are saying, it would have been one thing if I was like, this isn't a knock on OpenAI, but if I had just said, oh, I'm just go straight to them, this is a startup that's doing this, and I'll just give them all my data, and I have no relationship with them. We have a deep relationship with Microsoft. Our entire business runs on Microsoft. So that certainly has been a question that's been asked, is like, okay, well, how are we protecting this? Well, same protection tools that is provided within Microsoft and Azure for all of our other systems is in place here. It's just another, as I mentioned earlier, it's just another service, another tool in the tool set, and they take the security as seriously with this, obviously, as they do with everything else. So that was not a difficult sell for me. And then I think people are comfortable, if I'm comfortable with, from a trust perspective, that we're good. So and that's certainly the case for me.
I love that. I think it's that mindset shift of being afraid of something or not knowing how something works, to the point of, hey, it's not just a tool in our toolbox, right? How do we use this to our advantage? How can we trust it just like we trust everything else, in our infrastructure, to be able to go innovate and move the industry forward? So that's awesome. Quick time check. We're almost at our Q&A point. So soon we will get to people's questions, but just to wrap it up, let's talk about looking ahead. You're able to build this RAG application and this chatbot, but what is everybody talking about today? It's all about agents, right? Agents and intelligent orchestration with agents. But getting to the point of agents, there's a lot of steps you got to do, right? You got to build iteratively towards that future of agents. And I think where you were at, and what we saw was like the foundational point of, hey, you're able to get accurate answers. You were able to, find something valuable and bring it to a place where it is natural for people to interact with it. And then we get to this point of, okay, how do we allow agents to kind of automate more of, whether it's a process or some sort of piece of that experience. How are you thinking about agents and what could be next for Atlas, or what could be next outside of just Atlas at Baypoint?
Yeah. Chatbots, they're great, right? It's great, but it's, it's very limiting what you can do with that. You can use it to ask questions. You can, open it up to your customers to ask questions, et cetera. But I mean, I don't do all this just so we can put a nice friendly chatbot on our screen. The way I see it is leveraging things like RAG AI. We're kind of constructing the digital brain of Baypoint, and that digital brain needs to know about every loan we've ever done, every loan, maybe every loan that we didn't do and why didn't we do it. Every investor we've got, the details of all those investors, because you mentioned agents. That's where I think the real business opportunities are right there, right? Now, you go outside of that. In our case, I'm looking at what other AI agents could I integrate with, or maybe even just API calls to outside services where, maybe you can pull leads in from another service, but it's not good enough to just have some random leads from somewhere. You need something to be able to evaluate your business. And what better way than if you got this AI that intimately understands your business, every deal you've ever done, and can make decisions and find leads based off that. So we're looking into ways, to help. Back to that question of, how do you find more loans? How do you find more investors? Well, teach it first. You got to teach it your business and teach it how you operate. And then, so now we're looking into, I was talking with Kellen some about, within Foundry, you have these, you can spin up these agents now within the projects and all that. And there's third-party financial services that are already there, AI agents that you can kind of hook into. So I'm looking at how to potentially use something like maybe go back and look at Langflow and a way to kind of orchestrate a workflow automation of something that goes and pulls data, compares it, talks to our brain, and makes decisions. And it's a new frontier to me in technology. It's you got machines talking to machines, and it's exciting where this can go.
Totally. And I think what's really interesting as well is, it's going past just that chat experience, right? It's actually automating something. We're looking at go to market, right? Like the initial question was, go find me more investors, right? Okay, well, once you got that brain of, okay, who is Baypoint and how does Baypoint operate? Okay, now you can start thinking of the different processes in that go to market effort and supply chain that you're like, okay, where does the agent fit in here? How can our agent speak to other agents? Or, when you start having multiple agents within the organization, how do they work together to make it easier and better to find the right investor at the right time? So I love that. And Kellen, I would love to hear from you. Again, Build was all about agents. What are some of the things Microsoft is doing to help make, these agents come to life? One of my favorite announcements was Entra for agents, being able to tag an agent as if it was an employee. Again, really focusing on like security and compliance piece of, the future. What are some of the things that come top of mind for you?
I would say, the biggest thing is adding the orchestration and logic. I mean, the most difficult thing is, orchestrating how agents are going to communicate with each other, and what's the full end-to-end workflow of how we're going to, deploy this and how it's all going to work together. I think simplifying that, at least like we said with Azure AI agents, and integrating it with different tools, and just making and simplifying it from that standpoint. And then I think the other thing too, and like we say is these agents are only as good as the data it can access. Data stacks, that's going to provide a lot of customers on Azure the ability to, crucial, that data store for agent memory and those like things, and that's the beauty of it. Like I'll reiterate again, having those third-party tools and those ability to bring in things like, Astra or is making this that much better. An agent, we're going to constantly see the evolution of, agents come to the forefront in different ways to use them. I mean, it's like every day I'm talking with customers, or something different, or some usability, or, if you follow the field, anybody that's in the AI field, it's changing weekly, and things that, you're seeing different papers or different approaches to do things. And I think, it's here, it's not leaving, it's just hold on, and, yeah, it's going to get
For dear
bumpy,
life.
but yeah, because I mean, and it's going to be fun.
Totally. I think just to summarize some of the points we've talked about is both Microsoft and DataStax. We love to help our customers, right? And so much is changing out there that bringing our brain trusts together to solve hard problems and to bring both AI and agents to difficult industries like financial services. That's what we're here to do, and we've made it easy, right? Like, we're trying to make these tools super easy rather than looking at thousands of lines of code. I think we're looking at like hundreds of lines, right? And that was thanks to a lot of the innovation that we've brought with our forces combined. Love to see AstroDB being kind of at the central heart of the brain trust for Baypoint. Also reiterating how Langflow was able to help you kind of build very early stage, test, evaluate, iterate, get you to this point of how you are going to have your collections and all the metadata ready for the large language model to then do what it needs to do to bring that AI experience to Atlas, your investor portal. Really appreciate both of you spending the time to speak about your experience and being here with us. And thank you to all the viewers that got to join us in this fireside chat. Now, with that, I would love to open up to Q&A. I'm sure there is tons of questions out there. Let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly look through. What's the next steps that Atlas is trying to explore? There are many things out there, contract compliance and optimization. Is there anything aside from just the data room maybe you're thinking through, Rick?
Oh yeah, I mean, we've got a lot going on. We're implementing a pay by bank, solution where investors can do their investments straight through the portal. There's a lot of things like that. But I'm always I'm now added to it, like, how could AI help make this better? What could we do here to make that better? But yeah, we're focused with the platform to be kind of a one-stop shopping. It handles all the onboarding, it handles all the fundraising, all the operations of the needs of the investor. And I think if it's not there, we'll post in the chat or something, a URL, so you can learn more about that. But yeah, really back to what I was talking about towards the end, as far as the agents, I'm trying to shift. But I will say there was one thing we added. We also added another chat bot that would actually allow the stewards of the business to actually ask questions of investors in the loans and then get detailed answers about that. So again, trying to open up just some internal tooling I want to get people within the company excited about it, like, hey, this is great, give me more of this. Because the more excitement that we get from investors and from internal users, the easier it is to implement the next AI thing. But yeah, really for me is moving into the agent space, I think.
Nice. Another great question. Can you share or discuss the design process you had for the platform? And I think we were talking a little bit about it earlier. And I think in this question, they're looking for what added the greatest amount of value? And is there anything you would change or improve if you were to go over this process again to getting to the point where, Atlas is in the hands of investors?
I wish I had the SDK sooner. That would have probably made the development. But
we
hey,
were working on it.
But I've got it now.
Yeah.
That I spent a lot of time in plumbing code. Just trying to get things right there. That certainly, that whole chunking process is like 20 lines of code, to do that. So once you have everything down, that becomes a very easy thing to do. But yeah, it was a you know, a lot of back and forth, a lot of stop and start initially, you know, getting familiar with the data API, and then, you know, hitting hurdles. Like there was a case where I was, you know, trying to use I was using the wrong model to embed with, and you know, I couldn't understand why, you know, something wasn't working right. And you just really have to spend a lot of time nailing down that configuration, having that forethought on your models, on your prompts. But at the end of the day, you know, you got to take a step back. What am I trying to accomplish from a business perspective here? And then figure out what that is, and then start backing into the technical to get it to work. Because I know I did as I was exploring this technology, is that sometimes you just want to just write code and do stuff just for the sake of, hey, let's see if I can do this. And there's a time and place for that. But at the end of the day, it has to improve and help your business in some way. And so, you know, taking that time to do that. I don't know if I really answered the question, but
yeah, you know, I'll reiterate that point you mentioned. You know, like why you use an embedding model versus a foundation model, right? Like just that understanding was an early hiccup you ran into, and so hopefully those in the audience are going to go furiously chat GPT that, you know, the difference between using them and why, right? Like embedding model is what, you know, helps take your chunks, turn them into the vector embeddings, and then the foundation model is what then uses that information to then, you know, ground its responses.
Yeah, you definitely have to document what you're doing as you go. Because the mistake I made is that in the early stages, I got everything working and I'm like, okay, this is great. Then I went to apply it to my test environment, and I couldn't get anything to work. And I was like, well, I can't remember what did I do in AI Foundry here to get that working. I can't remember. And then I'm on a Slack call with somebody at DataStax, or I'm asking Kellen or somebody, and it's just, you want to kind of jump through and kind of figure all this stuff out at once, but take the time to document as you go. Otherwise, you're just going to do all this, you're going to get to the end, and then you're going to try to repeat it, and you can't. So
how valuable was it to have that visual representation in LangFlow of the different pieces, right? Like you mentioned documentation, and I think that's one great piece of why you use LangFlow early on, is you kind of see where everything is put together. You know, you can very easily see it from a bird's eye view. You can also very easily change things around, right? And how we're able to, you know, bring vectorization to, you know, is just like a service within LangFlow. You just, you know, configure it once, and you can bring those components together for data ingestion. But just that ability to see it. Did you find that valuable?
Yeah, it's very daunting. Like in my mind, I think in like a .NET world. I start thinking, okay, how am I gonna put this together? And it's very daunting. We've got a lot of projects we're working on, so had it been left to those devices, I may have just said, well, look, this is too much. Let's go do something different. But when we started working with you guys in LangFlow, and you're able to drop a document in, okay, let's parse this document, then let's send this to here. And, you know, the first round, that proof of concept, the people on my team working on that, including myself, or these people, they weren't even developers. They were just, you know, dragging and dropping the workflow onto the screen. And they're like, hey, look, this works. I'm like, and again, as soon as you see it work, it's like, okay, now let's see if we can reproduce this in our world, because this is.
So you never show code to those people, right? Like
they don't
show
care.
them code.
Yeah, no, they don't. If they had to write code, they would be like, oh yeah, this doesn't work. You know, let's try something else. But
so
that's
just
what you have Copilot for.
Translate.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, let Copilot write it now.
Yes, but also just that translation layer of like, hey, we're building this complex system.
Yeah,
you can look and see and feel it in LangFlow, and we can kind of figure out that all the parts are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, because I mean, again, you take a step back and look. There are, you know, a lot of it seems really easy to me now, like because the tools make it easy. But there is, you know, there's a bit of a learning curve up front. But again, that's where, you know, the DataStax team and Microsoft kind of held my hand and held our hand and made it easy.
Great. Well, we've got two more questions before we wrap it up. I know we're almost at time. The one, how much time did this POC take from idea to MVP? And then also, did you come up with any like accuracy scoring to improve responses?
Yeah, so I guess it depends. We did a couple proof of concepts. The initial proof of concept honestly, it probably took a couple months, and not because we were working for a couple months. It was kind of like something we're concocting in the lab, and it's like, okay, well, we're off working on real world things. We'd have to come back to it. A lot of times the DataStax people coming to me going, "Hey, Rick, how's it going with this?" I haven't looked at it this week. I'll get back to it, but I would say if you boiled it down, probably a couple weeks of work on the initial. But honestly, when I switched gears to the data room concept, we'd already gone through the process of dealing with embeddings and asking questions. There, it was just putting the pieces together, and that came together surprisingly quick for me. With that part of it. Yeah. And what was the second question?
The second question, how did you use accuracy scoring or like evaluation?
Yeah. This is something I was talking to somebody about this, is that what's odd here, and just in testing in general, in the past you'd write, unit tests or whatever, and with most computer programs, it's going to always give you this answer if you do this, right? It's going to, if you, but here, I don't know what the LLM, it would answer the same question, 100 different ways each time. So right. I don't know what it's doing. So, honestly, I've been kicking that around, and I know that DataStax has been working with some partners that do this, and I want to probably talk more with Greg about this, but really, and not taking it quantitatively, it's been more of a qualitative analysis. Is we throw at questions, and if they seem reasonable, and we're getting, like, I sat down with the senior management team, and I'm like, I'm like, okay, ask it whatever you want. I'm like, oh my God, what are they going to ask it? and they were constantly impressed with it. Like, hey, that I don't think I could have answered that better myself. The best story I have, though, is that we had a tax deferred instrument we were looking at, and anyway, we had to set up the data room for it, and they were asking basic questions like, what are the tax advantages of this account or of this offering, and it gave them an answer, and it mentioned some tax code or something that is a big advantage and why you would want to do this, and they were like, oh, I didn't know it did that, and we had to go pull the document and read it and go, yeah, it is doing that. Wow. So we're learning about our own product. I keep joking that we're going to do a competition between our big fund managers versus this, and ask questions and see who can answer them better, because it's, I know, again, it's all high math and the vector array, but it still seems like magic sometimes, when you're working through it.
I love, it's almost like a chess against AI, right? Like pin the humans against the AI.
Yeah,
who knows the fun's better.
Yeah, it keeps it fun. But yeah, from a testing perspective, I'm always like, I don't know what people are going to ask, and I don't know. That's why you got to spend a lot of time and make sure your attorneys or whatever get the disclaimers right, on use of this, because I don't know what this thing's going to say, but I'll be honest with you, the only time I've noticed it not give me an amazing answer was when I only gave it like one document to work on. We did an example. We just uploaded one document, and it gave a fair answer. But when you give it 500 documents, or you give it 50 documents, whatever, then it has much more information to make a good decision with. And so that's part of the whole thing as well, is that you gotta spend time there and make sure you get everything loaded properly.
Awesome. All right, well, we're a little over time. Thank you so much, Rick. Thank you so much, Kellen, for joining us on this awesome webinar. Thanks again to the audience that stepped through it with us. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and good luck on all your AI projects.